Today's shiur will begin at the very bottom of Daf Samach Vov Omid Beis. We are, as you can see, beginning the 10th parak of Nedarim, parak Nara Hamurasa. Before we begin this parak, we highly recommend going over the psukim in the Torah that are relevant for this parak. The psukim you will find in Bandidopa, parak Lamed. We're going to briefly or superficially go through the psukim found there in parak Lamed in order to get a flavor of the issues dealt with in this parak. There are numerous drushas that focus on the psukim, so having an overview beforehand is very worthwhile. So turn to Bandidopa, parak Lamed, and we will start with pasuk Dalid. The couple of psukim before this deal with a man who vows, and the Torah exhorts him to keep his word. This parak deals with a girl, a woman who vows, who is 12 years of age, between 12 and 12 and a half, is called a Nara. Hence the name of this parak, Nara. Murasa means she is getting married to a man. But in order to appreciate the whole picture, we continue with the psukim in Bandidopa, parak Lamed pasuk Dalid, and we will continue reading with a very, very superficial translation in order to get a flavor of the things. V'isha ki sidor neder lashem, a woman when she vows, v'osor isor b'veis avia b'nurel, and she imposes a restriction while she's in her father's house. B'nurel means she is of age. She is between 12 and 12 and a half. A girl, a minor, whatever she says, her vows are not binding. There is a discussion concerning a woman, girl between age 11 and 12, which we'll leave aside for the time being. But when you want to speak about a certainty where a vow could be binding, that is when you're dealing with a girl age 12. V'shoma avia es nidra v'esara asher osra nafsha, and the father hears of the vow. V'echrish lavia, and the father remains silent. V'komu kol nidrel v'chol isra asher osra nafsha yakum, and with the father's silence, so the vow that the girl had taken, that the Nara had taken, is binding. Vim heini avia oisa biyom shamo, if the father heini means he disallows, he objects, he stops. When you look into the word heini further, you look in Rashi on the Chumash, you'll see that the word heini he stops her with his annulment, with his hafara of the vow. But he has to do so b'yom shema, on the day that he hears it. So kol nidorel v'sara she'osra nafsho lo yakum. So her vows and the restrictions that she imposed will not be binding. Vashem yisachla ki eni v'yasa. The Almighty should forgive her, for her father disallowed her. Vim hoyosia liish unidorel leo. And here is where our parak starts to deals primarily with this issue, with the Nara. Then hoyosia liish, she enters marriage. Unidorel leo. She enters marriage and she has vows, other kinds of vows, and her husband hears of the vow and remains silent on the day that he hears of her vow, and her vows will be binding. If on the day that her husband hears of it, he is mefer, he disallows it, he annuls the vow, then Vashem Yislach Law. Then the vow, of course, will not be binding, and Hashem should forgive her. The vows of a widow or of a divorcee, whatever she vows, will be binding. She's not under the control of her father. She's not married to a husband. So what she says goes. And if in her husband's house she vows, and the husband hears of the vow and he doesn't stop it, and all her vows will be binding. Now you might get a sense of maybe repetition. We mentioned in Pasuk Zayin, if she enters marriage, and here we have a woman who is married. So that's something to bear in mind. One should be aware, and we've spoken about this extensively in the last couple of months of shiurim. Let's just remind you that when you deal with marriage according to traditional Torah law, marriage is achieved in two stages. There's kiddushin, or we call erusin, and then nisuin. Erusin is the first stage where a man offers a woman something of value, we could say money, in exchange for her accepting or agreeing to marry him. At that point, she is considered a married woman. She's an arusa. And then, in the time of the Gamora, there was a later stage where they would enter a marriage canopy. We call that chuppah, which results in the second stage we call nisuin, at which point the couple consummates their marriage with intimacy and they live together, husband and wife. So the double reference in the psukim to a woman who is married will, as you will see, refer to the erusin stage and the later nisuin stage. So both stages have to be dealt with, and they're referred to in these different psukim. We continue with the pasuk. We mentioned pasuk Yud Beis, that if her husband hears of the vow and he doesn't stop her, so she will be bound to them. And pasuk Yud Gimel says, if the husband then objects and annuls the vow on the day that he hears of it, not a day later or 2 days later, but on the very day that he hears of it, then everything that she had vowed will not stand, is not binding. Her husband annulled it, and Hashem should forgive her. All vows and oaths that create self-infliction or self-deprivation, those kind of vows, her husband can establish them or substantiate them, or her husband can annul them. If the husband remains silent for 24 hours, or from day to day, more accurately, in other words, on the day that he hears it, he remains silent, then that will substantiate her vows. Hakim oisam ki hechrish lo b'yom shamo. His silence, in effect, is a substantiation of her vows, because he remains silent on the day that he heard it. If he annulled them after he hears it, hears the vow, v'nosa es avona. That is a phrase that needs further analysis, so we're not going to translate that. These are the rules that Hashem commanded Moshe that concern a man and his wife, a father and his daughter, as a Nara, as a girl between 12 and 12 and a half, while she's in her father's house. We read the psukim very, very quickly. We didn't dwell on the precise meaning of words. We just tried to give each one a feeling, a flavor of what to expect. Now, we turn to the Mishnah, the beginning of the 10th perek. Again, we draw your attention to the last line of Samach Vov Omid Beis. Nara Hamurasa. A Nara who entered the first stage of marriage, the Erusin stage, and again, she's between 12 and 12 and a half, Aviu Baila Mefirin Nedareha. The father and the husband annul her vows. We're trying to stick to more or less a literal translation. There is more to talk about, and the Gemara will certainly deal with it. The Ran adds valuable information. Nam Rosa Novio Balon Furnadra Afilu Nedarim Shinodra Beloida Penia. Here we're talking about vows that she may have made even while she was a single girl, before she entered Erusin. The Orus Mefer B'Koidmin B'Shufasei Da'av. Kiddush B'Gemara. Here the Ran is revealing conclusions that the Gemara will eventually get to, but before we get to these conclusions in the Gemara, we're going to have to go through several stages of questioning. That having been said, the Mishnah reveals to us that the Orus, we'll call him the husband at first stage of marriage, working in conjunction with the father, can annul vows that she had taken before she entered this husband's domain, before he entered the picture. That's called a mefer b'koidmin. Koidmin or kodem, the vows that were from before. This will stand in stark contrast to the range of the husband after the marriage is consummated. The Nara denokat, the word Nara that opens this parak, lafuke bogeres, to the exclusion of a bogeres, that's a girl above 12 and a half years of age. A girl at that age, she'ein lo v'yerushusba, the father has no reign over, no control over her. V'eino mefer nedorah, the father, if she's a single girl and living still in her father's home, he has no control over those vows. The orus nami below shivsei, and orus without the joint efforts of a father, of her father, lo motzi mefer, the orus cannot annul her vows. Avol hu adinami debas yidal shonu shonu shenedra nifdokim davoros mefir nedra. We alluded to this a little bit earlier in passing, that there is seriousness to vows taken by a girl between age 11 and 12. We'll leave that aside. We don't have to focus on that right now. Rather, Nara, as we indicated, is a girl between 12 and 12 and a half. And as the Mishnah says, she is also mureses. So, Avil Vaila Mefirin Neda, her father and her husband annul her vows. We continue at the top of Samach Zayin Omen Aleph. At this point, the Mishnah says something that might seem obvious. The Gemara will deal with this, though. Hefer Av lo Hefer Abal. If the father annuls and the husband doesn't, as Rashi says, he remains silent for 24 hours. Hefer Abal lo Hefer Av, or the husband indicates his disapproval, his annulment, and not the father. Eino mufer, the vow is not annulled, because we need both the husband and the father to annul the Na'ara Hamurosa's vow. V'ein tzorach lomar shikayim echad mehem, and it goes without saying that one of them, in a positive fashion, established, reinforced her vow. The Gemara asks, Hainu Reisha Avia Ubaila Mefirin Nidareh. Is it not so that the continuation of the Mishnah is in effect what the beginning of the Mishnah said? The Mishnah had said here, looking at the top line, it said here, Hefer ha'av lo hefer ba'al, if the father annulled and the husband did not, so the vow is going to kick in. It will be effective. It will be a standing vow. Well, isn't that what the Reisha said? Did the Reisha, the opening of the Mishnah, said that a Namrasa, she needs to have the father and the husband annulling her vows. Obviously, if they don't both annul it, so the vow will stand. Why then is it important for the Mishnah to go on to say the obvious, that, well, if the father annuls without the husband, so the vow will stand? That was understood at the opening line of the Mishnah. The Gemara answers, Mal de Tema. I would have thought from the opening line alone that now, which said, Naro hamurasa ovia ubaila. What does that mean, ovia ubaila? I might have thought it meant, oy ovia, oy baila, katani. It's either or. It would have been enough for either the father or the husband to annul. Oh, and that's not true. Komash Malon, that's why the Mishnah goes on to clarify that the opening expression of Ovia Ubaila meant her father and her husband. And therefore, if only one was mefer, if only one annulled, and the other did not, the vow will stand. V'ein tzorach loymar shikiyim echad mehem. The Mishnah went on to say, and it goes without saying, that the vow will stand if one of them substantiates. Mekayim is to second the motion, so to speak. He establishes, he concurs with the vow. Lama li lemisna. Why is that necessary to be taught? Hashta yesh loymar hefer zeh below zeh velo klum. Once you tell me that if only one of them, the father or the husband, only one of them was mefer without the cooperation of the other, so the hafara is nothing, the annulment is nothing, is not effective. Kiyem echad mehem lomali. Why does the Mishnah have to tell us that if one of them substantiates the vow, that her vow will be standing? The idea of one of them substantiating the vow is certainly a case of one being mefer without the other one being mefer, and even more. So once you tell me that if one is mefer without the other, that the vow is standing, so this is obvious. Namely, it's obvious if one of them, father or husband, substantiates the vow, that the vow will be standing. The Gemara answers, Ki itzrich le kagon. The teaching of the Mishnah is necessary under the following circumstances. For example, the hefer echad mehem, v'kiyem echad, where one father or a husband, one of them annulled, the other one substantiated the vow, v'chozar hamekayim v'nishal hakamoso, and then that one who concurred with the vow reverses or rescinds his confirmation through a she'ela, through approaching a Torah sage and expressing his regrets about his substantiating her vow. Mahu detema. Without the Mishnah, I might have thought, my deuki ho'akre, that which he originally had substantiated, he has now reversed. And with that, all that would be necessary would be his annulling. And the original party that annulled doesn't have to do anything, because the original annulment is there. It remains. In the interim, the other one had been mekayim, had concurred with the vow, but then he went and rescinded his concurrence. Chomash Malon, what the Mishnah reveals to us is, with the extra expression in the Mishnah, the mefirin shnehem bebas achas, that what's necessary now at this point in such a case is for the one who originally annulled must annul again together with this one, the one who originally had been mekayim the vow. Of course, the one who had been mekayim the vow, when he rescinds his kiyum, he will be mefer, but it's important for the original party who was mefer to be mefer again. We look together at the Ran commentary. The Gemara says later on that if within the same day that the father or the husband had concurred with her vow, he reverses his thinking and wants to rescind his confirmation, he can do so. That's pointed out in the Gemara by approaching a Torah sage, as is the procedure with the absolution of vows in general. Ma'u detema, one might have thought without our Mishnah. Mai du'uki ho akre. That which he had originally concurred with the vow, he now uprooted it. Ubahafora de mekayim l'chudei sagi v'idach kvar hefer. And with the formal annulment of the one who was mekayim, that's enough. As far as the hafora of the original one, that remains in its place. Chomash Malon, what the Mishnah is telling us is the ad mefirun shnei b'vasachas, that the hafora will not be an effective hafora unless both husband and father jointly are mefer. Klomar shelo yafsik bein echad l'chavero, there shall be no block between the hafora of one and the hafora of the other. What do we mean by that? There should be no block between them. Dover shuma akiv hafora, something that would prevent the effectiveness of annulment. Kagoin hakoma dahai. The example, obviously, is the concurrence of one of them following the hafora of the first party. The kevon dahi shaita, since at that moment, at that time that the one that concurred, that substantiated the vow, lav bar haforahu. Once you establish at that point, you can no longer, I repeat here, at that moment that you're mekayim, so you can't be mefer. Afilu ha chafora kamaisa diidach botlala. Since the mekayim's hafora is non-existent by virtue of the fact that he was mekayim, so the original hafara is also annulled. And therefore both father and husband have to be mefer. Umiu b'chai sagi shelo tomar ein hafara achar hafara v'kevon the hafara kamo iftila su lo motzi mefer the lesa. And with everything we've said, then, is you should realize, do not think that a hafara after a hafara cannot be done since the original hafara was botel. Don't think that. We have in fact a situation where the original hafara was botel, but that doesn't mean the end of hafara as a possibility, as we just described. So all of that, it sounds like maybe a lengthy explanation, but that is what the Mishnah was conveying to us when we were told v'ein tzorach lomar shikim echad mehem. We come back to the Gemara. V'nara hamrasa aviu bailo mefir nedarim minolon. From where do we know this? That a na hamarasa, the father and the husband working together, are mefer her vows. Omar Rabba. Now we have a new marking, so we glance at the side where we have a nosei mivne heading. We emphasize that this marking scheme lasts till Daf Samach Ches Amud Aleph, which means that if you have Samach Ches Amud Aleph readily available, you'll notice a second bow tie on the top of Samaches. What are they? The explanation on the side reads, Mahu hamoker loimar denarim rosaviu bailom firnura. What's the source for this point that a nam rosa, her father and husband, annul her vows? The Gemara. So Omar Rabba, Omar Kra, the Pasuk says, and here we're looking at Bamidbar Perek Lamed Pasuk Zayin, Vim Hayoy Tiyeh Leish Unidoreh Oleha. And if she enters marriage, and she has vows, Mikan, from here we see Lenam Rasa Shavil Bailo Mefirim Nidoreh, that her father and husband annul her vows. Now, there are obvious questions. How exactly do you see that? So what we do at this point is we glance at Rashi. What Rashi that we're looking at is in the middle of the wide lines, under the Gamora text. Omar Kra Ve'im Hayo Sielish Le'el Mehai Kra Ksiv. Right before this pasuk, it said, Ki Heini Avia Oisa. So if you have the psukim in front of you, you can see that it described her father having stopped her vow. Uksiv, and then it says with a vav, ve'im hayot yelish. Vav moisif al inyan rishon. The vav is a connecting letter. It's a continuation. In other words, it connects the two phrases, so that while we had read it at the end of pasuk vav, her father had stopped her vow, and she is married. So that vav says the chihechi da'av mevatel nidrei bita b'zman shibrush. So just like a father annuls the vows of his daughter when she is in his domain, hochinami mevatel im habal kozman shiarusa. So too the father annuls together with the husband as long as she is in the erusin state, that first stage of marriage. Da'dayin hi brusha, so she's still considered in the father's domain. So it's all in a letter, the vav. We continue in the Gemara. You notice a new marking, a triangle appears. On the side we have v'ema, that's the word that we've highlighted. Kushos al Rabba, these represent questions or challenges to what Rabba said. We continue. V'ema hai kra b'nesua ksiv. Could it not be said that this pasuk is talking about a nesua, a girl who consummated her marriage? Namely, the pasuk says v'im hoyo tiyeh leish, and if she is married, so the husband annuls her vows. Nothing to do with the involvement of a father. So the Gemara answers, Mishum nesua. If you are to think that that the pasuk is speaking about a nesua, well, kra achrin uksiv, there's another pasuk Yud Aleph, in beis isha nadara, if in the house of her husband she vowed. The Gemara asks, v'ema travaya b'nesua. Let us suggest that actually both psukim are talking about a nesua, pasuk Zayin and pasuk Yud Aleph. You might ask, what do I need to have two psukim referring to the same thing, referring to a woman who consummated her marriage, to tell me that her husband can annuls her vows? Well, l'meimar she'ein habal mefer bekodmin. I need the extra pasuk to tell me that a husband cannot annul the vows of his wife before she entered his domain. In other words, previous vows are not something that the husband can annul. Looking at Rashi, that you could see around 6 lines from the bottom. Both let us suggest that both psukim are talking about the nesua, the baal mefer, that the husband annuls. You might ask, what do I need two psukim regarding the woman who consummated her marriage? Well, I'll answer that. Chad Lomar loch, one is necessary to tell me she'ein habal mefer b'koidmin, that a husband cannot annul vows that were prior to her becoming married to him. That pasuk, which pasuk Zayin, tells me that a husband is is granted the power to annul the vows of his Nesuah, his Nesuah wife. V'im Beis Isha Nadara, which was Pasuk Yud Aleph, Mashma the Ois Nedarim Shenotra Beis Isha Mefer Baila. Only those vows that she vowed while in his domain, he can annul. Avalim Hoyu Alel Nedarim Kodim Shenasa. But if she had vows that she had taken before Nisuin, that she had taken while she was an Arusa, and he then subsequently consummated the marriage, those he cannot undo. So it could very well be then, at this point, both psukim are talking about a Nisuin. I don't learn anything about a Nara Ha'amurasa, that the husband works in conjunction and partnership with the father. So we're still left with seeking a source for the Mishnah that husband and Orus jointly annul her vows. The Gemara answers, V'lav memela shamis mina. This is a phrase that's very terse, but if we look in Rashi at the top, we'll hopefully gain an understanding. Rashi at the top, we have turned, of course, to Amid Beis. Rashi says, "V'lav memelo dilioilam im hoyo sieh osi l'nar murasa." We have to conclude that the v'im hoyo sieh pasuk is referring to the nar murasa. The ikide kol amris trab nisua. If you're going to try to press your point that both are talking about a nisua, lomali, what do I need two psukim for that purpose? Lo lichtov ella v'im beis isha nadara lechudei. Let the Torah have written just pasuk yud aleph umemela shamas mina di'enu mefer b'koidmin, and from that I would learn that a consummated marriage husband does not undo previous vows. The mashma, from this we could easily infer in beis isha. In Beis Isha Nadara V'lo Ma Shenadra Kodem Lachein. That which she vowed in her husband's house, he's mefer, not that which she vowed beforehand. V'im Hoyo Sia Lomali. What do I need to tell us again that a husband can annul vows by saying that Pasuk Zayin deals with a husband in a Nisuin situation? I don't need that. Once I tell you that the husband cannot mefer previous vows, but he is able to mefer the vows taken in his domain. So I know that a husband that has reached Nisuin is capable of annulling vows. What is going to be revealed by Vimhoyo Sieliish in that regard? Therefore, Shadia Larusa, send it to refer to the Arusa, the early stage of marriage. Shabal Vav Mefir Nidorel. So that's answer number one. Once again, just to repeat, there's no need to have two psukim to tell me about a Nisua, because I could have figured out all the information necessary by stating just Pasuk Yud Aleph. Wherein in that Pasuk I learned the concept of Ein HaBaal Mefer B'Kodman, and at the same time I see that a Baal is Mefer the Nedarim. So what is the role of having Pasuk Zayin of V'im Hoyo Tiyeh? So we say it refers to the case of the Orus. The Gemara goes on, Havaya Kiddushin Mashma. Havaya is a reference to the expression that you see in the beginning of Pasuk Zayin, V'im Hoyo Tiyeh. That is what the Gemara means when it says Havaya, V'im Hoyo Tiyeh of Pasuk Zayin. So being that Havaya V'im Hoyo Tiyeh implies Kiddushin is Erusin, it's Erusin and not Nisuin. So the suggestion that both Psukim, including Pasuk Zayin, is a reference to Nisuin is rejected. There is a new marking, a diamond with a double underline. On the side you can see the Mivneh, Hatzos Chilufios. We have now, we'll say, alternative suggestions to the halacha. So the halacha is that a father works in conjunction with the orus to annul her vows. The Gemara asks, And bear in mind that these questions are questions that will necessitate a scriptural response. Because we know, as far as the Mishnah is concerned, that the Mishnah rejects these suggestions. Like if you scan ahead, the first suggestion is maybe a father is mefer alone. We already saw that is not the case from the Mishnah. So what's the point of the Gemara in asking this question? The point of the Gemara is we need a scriptural source to explain the rules of the Mishnah. So the Gemara asks, maybe a father on his own can annul the vows of his daughter who is an arusa. The Gemara responds, Im kain v'asra isar beis aviha. What we're doing here is it's an abbreviated quote of Psukim Daled through Vav. Those Psukim describe, we'll read again, v'asra isar beis aviha yani osa. That's the conclusion of that set of Psukim, which describes a girl who is completely in her father's domain, that the father has the ability to annul his daughter's vows. What do I have to describe that for? If the suggestion in the diamond that a father alone can mefer the vows of his daughter and arusa, where there's already a husband on the scene, the father still works on his own. So what do I have to tell you about a girl who's completely in her father's domain without an oros on the scene? What would I need Psukim Dalet through Vav if the suggestion of Av L'chudei is true? Hashto yesh lomar b'mokom oros. According to the suggestion, a father works on his own even when an oros is present, when he's in the picture. Mefer Av L'chudei. Let's read that line again. Hashto yesh lomar b'mokom oros. Mefer Av L'chudei. Shelo b'mokom oros mibaya. When there's no oros in the picture as was described in the Psukim Daled through Vav, do I need to be told that? So, what are we therefore going to conclude? That Psukim Daled through Vav tell us the circumstances of when a father works on his own, namely where there is no oros in the picture. But when there is an oros in the picture, then the father does not operate on his own, but only in conjunction, in partnership with the oros, in order to annul her vows. Amor, new suggestion. Av liboros, granted, a father needs an oros. The oros l'chudei mefer. This is our suggestion. And that's why you see a double underline. Let us suggest that the oros, though, can annul on his own. And when we say that, that means if the oros annuls, that would be sufficient without partnering with the father. We have a bracketed section, just 2 lines, following which we have the answer. So the purpose of the brackets is simply to get immediately to the answer. So let's do that initially. In Cain, if it were so that the oros can annul on his own, v'im beis isha nadara lemai kosav. This pasuk, v'im beis isha nadara, which we referred to earlier, this you can see in pasuk Yud Aleph. What do I need that pasuk for? That pasuk described a husband annulling the vows of his wife, the Nisu'ah, where she's completely outside her father's domain. If the last suggestion is true, that an oros can mefer on his own, I don't need to tell you about the husband of a Nisu'ah, as the Gemara explains. Let's read the answer again. Im kain v'im beis isha nadara lamai kosav kal v'chomer. I could figure that out, that a husband can mefer his wife who is a Nisu'ah on his own through kal v'chomer logic. Uma b'mokim av oros mefer l'chudei. Mind you, when a father is still in the picture. We haven't explained in detail with regard to what, but suffice it to say that when the girl has entered only the first stage of marriage, the Erusin stage, she hasn't completely left her father's domain. So that according to the most recent suggestion that an Oros could mefer on his own, mind you, the Oros where a father is still in the picture, the Oros can mefer on his own, shelo b'mokom av mibaya, that which is described in Pasuk Yud Aleph, namely the Nesua, that a husband can mefer on his own, that's obvious. Just to repeat, if the husband, when a father is in the picture, nevertheless husband can mefer on his own. When the father is not in the picture, certainly he can mefer on his own. So what would I need Pasuk Yud Aleph for? So the fact that we do have a Pasuk Yud Aleph and that which it says, I understand that the suggestion of Oros Lichudei Mefer is out of the picture. Now we have a bracketed section that we skipped. Let's go back to the diamond, reading the Gemara again with the bracketed section. Emo av leboy Oros. Let us suggest that a father needs the Oros. The Oros Lichudei Mefer, but the Oros on his own could be Mefer. V'chitemo av dekosav rachmono lomali. In order to appreciate this, we look at the Rosh commentary. The Rosh commentary that we're looking at is the fifth of the wide lines of the Rosh. V'chitemo av dekosav rachmono lomali tzorech l'arev haforas av Bahadi Oros, Kimat Elis Yesh Ba'aforoso. Why does the Torah have to mix in the annulling of a father together with an Oros? What value is there in the father's annulment? This is what you might ask. He on his own, Hu levado eino yochel lahafer, va'aforas Oros moil below haforas ha'av. And according to our suggestion, the hafora, the annulment of the Oros, works without the hafora of the Av. So that as we said before, when you read Pasuk Zayin, which had said V'im hoyo siel ish, that had connected the Oros together with the father. What do you need to mix the father in if this suggestion is to be taken seriously? So, as far as that question is concerned, we answer, Miboyale, di hokim. What is necessary about mentioning the father in this context is that if the father substantiates her vow, then it will remain as a vow. The Rashi, you can see the Rashi will read together 5 lines under the Gamora text. Miboyale dim hokim hakim, dim hakim hokim, sheyesh lo la'av bekach rishus bo. That the father, all of this is of course according to the Havamin, according to the suggestion. And that is that granted the father cannot be mefer on his own, and only the Oros is mefer on his own. The role of the father, though, under these circumstances, is if de'im heikim nederel, if the father will concur with her vows, ein Oros yochel shuv lahafer, then the Oros cannot annul. Aval below hakomasav, in the absence of the father seconding her motion, her vow, mefer baal l'chudei. Yes, the husband could mefer on his own, according to the suggestion. However, as the Gemara went on to say, we'll read the words again, Im Kain, if it were so, like the suggestion was that the Oros could be mefer on his own, the Imbeisi Shanadora, Lamai Kosav, what do I need that Pasuk Yud Aleph for? Kal v'chomer, I could have figured what is described in Pasuk Yud Aleph, namely the case of the Nesua, that the husband is mefer, from Kal v'chomer logic, Uma b'mokim av, Oros mefer l'chudei, mind you, where a father is in the picture and yet the Oros could mefer on his own according to the suggestion, Shelo b'mokim av mibaya, if you're dealing with a Nesua, is where the father is not in the picture anymore, all the more so the husband can mefer on his own. But we do have Pasuk Yud Aleph describing the case of the Nesua, therefore, Pasuk Zayin when reference is made to the Oros, he does not operate on his own. The Gemara asks, V'ema, and here Rashi inserts something that's critical in order to keep with the flow of the Gemara. There's a Rashi where you can see there's a star, V'ema, Li'olim Doros Mefer L'chudei. And we haven't marked this with a diamond because what this suggestion is, it's really a continuation of the immediate previous diamond, where let us suggest that the Oros does Mefer on his own. The Koamis Rashi goes on, because he came lomali. If you're going to tell me that the Oros can Mefer on his own, so am I not making Pasuk Yud Aleph superfluous? What do I need? Lomali loymar loch sheina. What do I need that for? Lomar loch sheina bal Mefer b'kodem. I'll tell you what I need that for. To tell me that in a case of nisuin, a husband does not Mefer b'kodem. In a case of nisuin, the husband does not annul vows that were taken by her prior to the nisuin. So let's now read that in the Gemara. The Gemara here is very terse, but we read V'ema, 3 lines from the bottom, V'ema, V'im beis isha nadara. I will tell you that in fact an Oros can be Mefer on his own, and as far as Pasuk Yud Aleph is concerned, its role is Lomar She'ein Habal Mefer B'Koidmin. So that Pasuk Yud Aleph is not superfluous. The Oros can Mefer on his own, and of course, in the case of Nisuin, the husband is Mefer on his own. But what the Torah is telling me is that when she enters Nisuin, so the husband does not Mefer previous vows. The Gemara answers, Umine. Oros Mefer B'Koidmin. The Rosh helps very much in explaining this answer. We look at the Rosh together, about 5 lines from the end of the Rosh commentary. Umishani umine, klomar, mehad darshinon minod yena bal mefer b'koimin. From that which you are telling me, that Pasuk Yud Aleph would inform us that a husband does not Mefer b'koimin, memei lo shamis, the Oros lechudei einu Mefer. From that point alone, I understand that an Oros does not Mefer on his own. The Mefer lechudei, if an Oros could Mefer on his own, tikshilach, you would then ask, Baal eino Mefer b'koimin, Oros Mefer b'koimin bitmiha. You read that with a tone of wonderment. Klomar, al korchoch Oros Mefer b'koimin. It's known, it's clear that an Oros is Mefer b'koidmin, k'nichtiv, unedoreha oleha. The Pasuk said explicitly in Pasuk Zion that when she enters marriage with the vows that are upon her. So if she's entering marriage with vows that are upon her, obviously she's got vows before their erison. V'chi b'shvil shenichnesa legamri l'rishuso. Could that be that when she is an Arusa, the Pasuk tells us that the Oros has the power, even though there's a father in the picture, the Oros has the power to annul vows previous to their relationship. Does it stand to reason that when she enters Nisuin and the father is out of the picture, that the husband becomes weaker, that he can't be Mefer b'Koidmin? And yet we know that. That's a given. That's a fact, that a husband cannot Mefer b'Koidmin with the Nisua. Ela al korchach. Therefore, we have to conclude the following. Ma sheyafa korchei lahafek shu Oros b'Koidmin. The strength that an Oros has in his ability to annul vows from before their relationship. How does the Oros have that power? Hainu mishum shutfusei de'av. It's only because the Oros functions as a partner with the father. She'eino Oros yochel lahafer levado. The Oros cannot Mefer on his own. So the Oros, because it's a type of balance here, a push and pull situation. Yes, it's true the oros can mefer b'koidmin, but it's only because there's a father that is present. The oros does not work on his own. Ukshenasa shemefer levado, eino mefer b'koidmin. And as we said, there's a balance here, push and pull. So when Nesuin sets in, where we saw from the psukim, he cannot mefer b'koidmin, the reason for that is, so to speak, is that even though there's a loss in strength on that side of things, but there's a gain in strength in the case of the Nesua, that the husband is able to be mefer on his own. You can imagine looking at the Gemara alone without any of the commentaries how difficult it would be to decipher it, but we'll just read that again. The suggestion had been, let us say the oros could be mefer on his own. And as far as Pasuk Yud Aleph is concerned, that is to tell me that a husband of a Nesua cannot be mefer b'koidmin. Well, that simply cannot be. Uminei oros mefer b'koidmin. And as we saw in the Rosh, what we're saying here is the fact that the oros can be mefer b'koidmin is only because there is a father in the picture. Otherwise, you'd have a logical problem, and that's why you read the Gemara with a tone of wonderment. That if you're telling me that a husband of a Nesua cannot be mefer b'koidmin, could it be possible that an orus could work on his own and also be mefer b'koidmin? Why would that be then? Why would it be that when she enters Nesuin, the husband loses strength? Lav, as the Gemara goes on to complete the idea, mishum shutfuse di'av, the fact that the orus is mefer b'koidmin, that he has that advantage, it's only because he functions in conjunction with her father. So at this point in the Gemara, by working with the psukim pasuk Zayin and pasuk Yud Aleph, we conclude that an orus, true, he's able to mefer b'koidmin, but his ability to mefer is only because he works in conjunction with the father. And that's what we were looking for. That's how the sugya began, with the first bow tie. And now we turn to the top of Samaches Amud Aleph, another bow tie, Debei Rebbe Yishmael Tana. First we look at the Ran commentary. Debei Rebbe Yishmael Tana, Bein Ish Liishto, Beinov Levito, Mikan Lenam Rasa, Shavio Baila Mefina D'Reah. From here we see that both, only if they work in tandem, the father and the husband, can the vows of the Nam Rasa be rescinded. The mashmale, the benara amrosa iri. It's mashma from this pasuk that we will see in the Gemara. We haven't read the Gemara yet. That benura beisavia umidisomach av lebito behadi ish mashma da'av ubal mafir nedoreha. Now we go to the Gamora text. The Bei Rabbi Shmuel Tana bein ish liishto bein av lebito. Mikan l'namurasa shalvia ubayla mefirin nidorea. So just to repeat from the way the Ran looks at the pasuk, you see here a reference to av labito, and that is in juxtaposition with ish liishto, and the pasuk says explicitly binureo beisofia. We figure that when you're dealing with a Nara, she is a Nara Hamurasa, father and husband work in tandem, work as partners. The Rashi at the top, Bein Ish Liishto Bein Av Labito, Ish V'Av Dechsivi Bahai Kro, the reference to father and husband in this pasuk, Lo Tzrifi, would be otherwise unnecessary. If all the pasuk is trying to tell me is that a father can annul his daughter's vows, a husband can annul his wife's vows, all that information has already been stated. Rather, from here, from this pasuk Yud Zayin, we learn that Nam Rasa, her vows were annulled only with the partnering of her father and her oros, her husband. And that is on the third line from the top, the bein avu bein ish mefir nedaro, the ish mefir chelko beishto, the av mefir chelko bevito. Namely, when you're dealing with a nara amorosa, the father annuls his portion, his holding in her, his domain over her, and the husband, the oros, annuls his portion, so to speak, in her. The Gemara continues, Uletano debe Rabbi Shmuel. According to this approach, the second bow tie approach, who sourced father and husband working in partnership based on pasuk Yud Zayin, what does Tana debe Rabbi Shmuel do? What does this opinion, the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael, do with pasuk Zayin? V'im hoyos yelish my ovidle. What do they learn from pasuk Zayin? If you recall, the vav of the word v'im at the beginning of pasuk Zayin was connecting the woman who in pasuk Zayin is described as getting married with that which was stated earlier, namely the father. So what does Tana debate Rabbi Yishmael do with this pasuk, the pasuk Zayin, which was the source for the first bow tie approach? Answer: Moikim le'idoch darabah. They, Tana Rabbi Shmuel, uses pasuk Zayin for another teaching of Rabbah. Here Rashi is terse. He simply says this will be discussed later on Daf Ayin, what the other teaching of Rabbah is. So, for our purposes, we understand that Tana Rabbi Shmuel has a use for an alternative use for pasuk Zayin. The Rabbah Haitana Haida Tani Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbah, who appeared in our first bow tie, as giving us the first source for Av and Baal being made for Nedarim. What does he do with pasuk Yud Zayin of Bein Ish Ishto? This pasuk answer mi boyalei lomar. Rabbah uses this pasuk to tell me Shabal Mefer Nedarim Shebeino Leveino. What kind of Nedarim, what kind of vows does a husband have the right to annul? Those vows that affect the husband-wife relationship. Rashi says, Devarim shebeino leveino kagon shelo eshamesh mitaso v'shelo ekho v'shelo eskashet. Things that are, we'll say, of an intimate husband-wife relation. Vows that would affect their relationship, whether it's a vow not to have intimacy or a vow not to wear cosmetics, things that could affect their personal relationship, and that is what Rabbah learns from pasuk Yud Zayin, where it says Bein Ish Lishto, those vows that come between husband and wife. Those are the kind of vows that a husband can annul. With that, we conclude our shiur for today.